Education Policy. Today, the last day of February 28. Unbelievable that we have spent all this time together and are closing in on March. And just a reminder that this is the last week to hear policy bills in this committee. Friday, we will end our policy hearings unless there is some special permission from the Rules Committee, which I don't think they're going to grant. Any bill that we might hear during our week of putting together the policy bill would be bills that have to go to finance. So keep that in mind, those in the audience as well as members. Representative Ward moves the minutes from February 23. Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, I'll renew Representative Ward's motion that the minutes for February 23 be approved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the minutes are approved for February 23 of 2017. Members, we have an active agenda today, beginning with House File 1478, Representative Loon. And we are going to be keeping track of the time for testimony. So please pay attention to the front desk for the warning signal or the alert that your time is running out. Representative Loon, welcome to our committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
And Representative Loon, I will move House File 1478. Members, Representative Loon does not wish me to offer the amendment, so we will proceed to an explanation of the bill. Members, this bill will be voted on today and sent to the General Register. Correct, Representative Loon?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct.
So Representative Loon, welcome again. Please say your name for the record so you're official and explain House File 1478.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Education, Innovation and Policy Committee. It's a pleasure to be before you. I'm Jennifer Loon, a state representative from Eden Prairie, and I'm pleased to present House File 1478 to you. For those who have been serving in previous legislatures, I have offered before legislation adjusting the process for what happens if a school district has to do an unrequested leave of absence or a layoff of teachers and staff. And what I have proposed previously would prescribe in some manner the process that a school district has to go through and the considerations that must be put into place when considering which teachers or staff to lay off, including teacher performance results from the TD&E process, their effectiveness ratings and whatnot. The goal of all of this has always been to try to allow school districts and working with their teachers and staff to retain the best staff possible when the unfortunate incidents occurs that they have to do unrequested leave of absence. And these can happen for a number of reasons, budgetary reasons, reduction in pupil counts, and it just is an occurrence that does happen in our school districts. We know that next to parent involvement, the number one factor that affects the ability of students to have academic success is an effective teacher in the classroom. And as our school districts are striving to make sure that they're putting those effective teachers in the classrooms, there's so many things that impact what they need to look at and what they need to consider if they're having to make any kind of a reduction in their teaching force. We've got new requirements from the Higher Learning Commission regarding teachers who provide concurrent enrollment classes to have a master's degree coming through. And that's something that our state has been investing millions of dollars in to help our teachers get their master's degrees so that we can have those concurrent enrollment classes. Shortages in certain types of teacher licensure impacts our school districts. Efforts to recruit more diversity among our teaching ranks, all really important considerations and things that districts are working hard to do. So the bill that I'm presenting today does not prescribe to school districts what type of process will be in place for a local district if a layoff occurs. But it does remove the statutory fallback that we have had in state law, which provides that if there is no locally negotiated plan, it is based solely on seniority. And it's referred to commonly as LIFO, which is last in, first out, which means that if you were one of the last hired and your school district has a reduction in force, you're going to be the first out the door. We have talked a lot probably in your committee, but in our committee as well, the Education Finance Committee, concerns about teacher shortage and why we're not seeing more people attracted into the field of teaching, or why we're not retaining those people. And I do believe that this is one of those factors, that you get bright young people into teaching, but regardless of their performance and their effectiveness as a teacher, if there is a layoff, they are the first to go, because that's just how the system works. And that is the process as prescribed in our state law. So I would remove that statutory fallback and require that every district have a negotiated plan. I don't prescribe what has to be in the plan. I leave that up to locals, to teachers and administrators and their representatives to determine. But I do think it's a step forward that encourages and actually requires that process to take place. And I do that with the interest of trying to have systems that really serve the best interests of our students, and making sure that those layoffs are proceeding in a very thoughtful manner, so that the best possible teachers can be retained where they are needed, and having that be a process that can be embraced by both administrators and teachers. So with that, Madam Chair, I do have a number of testifiers today. There's probably on both sides of this issue, and I think the committee would be well suited to hear from them now.
Thank you, Representative Loon. And we will begin with testifiers Max Ginsburg and Roberta Rasmussen. Both teachers, please come forward. Paige, could you provide another chair, please? Welcome to our committee, both of you. Whoever wants to begin, please say your name and what you represent, or who you represent, your school district, for example, maybe the level that you teach, and proceed.
Sure.
So, sir, begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak on HF 1478, which would remove the baseline language for unrequested leaves of absences for teachers during times of budget trouble. My name is Max Ginsburg. I'm an ELL teacher at Prairie View Elementary in Eden Prairie, and I've also been a member of the negotiating team for my district. I have 3 points to make about this bill. First, the effective date needs to change. It makes no sense to start in the middle of a contract cycle. Second, this language isn't going to benefit the students in Eden Prairie, and it might even hurt them by forcing their teachers and administrators to spend more time and energy on negotiations. Third, we need to be very, very careful about the unintended consequences of this bill. As you know, this fallback system of layoffs was created to stop discriminatory layoffs, such as women who became pregnant or teachers who followed the wrong faith. The current system is clear, predictable, and values objective traits like seniority, and resists discrimination because of gender, family relationship, religion, race, sexual orientation, or even outside political activity. Districts can negotiate more than that, but no Minnesota teacher working today has ever had to give up something at the negotiating table to protect their colleagues from prejudice. This bill could change that. Language to protect against arbitrary or vindictive layoffs will be put on the same level as the back and forth over minutes in the duty day, access to school mailboxes, and health insurance. You're setting the stage for trade-offs between protections from bias and personal finance, and that's a dangerous situation. You're tempting administrators to lay off the most expensive teachers regardless of talent. I would hope educators would do the right thing, but I was a history major, and I know that's not always the case, and how it works when rights, money, and majority rule come together. When I look around the country, I see a wave of anti-Semitism and hateful rhetoric toward immigrants and Muslims. And with that in mind, I worry about any weakening of protections against prejudice in this bill or anywhere. So I'll leave you with a question. Are the very real risks worth the very unlikely benefits of this bill? I say not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ginsburg. Succinct and within the time limit. Welcome, Ms. Rasmussen. Please say your name for the record and to begin.
Okay, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Roberta Hernandez Rasmussen. I'm a former kindergarten teacher and now do intervention work with students struggling in reading and math at Central Park Elementary School in Roseville. We need to focus on strategies proven to help our students. I've been teaching now for almost 20 years, and I can tell you what students need. At Central Park, 38% of our students are English language learners, and they speak 22 different languages. Many are dealing with trauma, and many, 3/4 to be exact, are living in poverty. Our children need access to mental health services, social workers, counselors, nurses, and other support staff. Central Park has a part-time social worker and a part-time psychologist for about 400 students. This isn't enough to meet the needs of our students. I had a student that had just arrived from a refugee camp with very, very little English, overwhelmed by all the newness and easily activated. There would be times when he would often start screaming, and as I would try to hold him and comfort him, I would be trying to talk across the room to my other 20 students as they sat and waited anxiously for me to return to them. Unmet needs might manifest themselves in discipline issues as well. Too often our students of color are the subjects of that school discipline. Every month, our staff looks at our behavior data. Student referrals persistently show a huge discrepancy between the numbers of black students referred to the office compared to white students. This means out of classroom time, which impacts their learning. Students also need teachers who look like them. In my school, the majority of students have brown and black skin. I have brown skin, which leads them to feel a kinship with me. I'm very comfortable talking with them about race. I can talk to our black girls when they tell me that they wish their skin was lighter, and we can discuss what that means for them as people living in this society. We need new policies to recruit and retain teachers of color. I have watched as my colleagues of color can no longer tolerate their experiences, and though they remain passionate about teaching, they leave. I've asked the administrators in my school and in my district about these things, and their answer always comes back to funding and what the state decides to do. So now I am here. There's a disconnect between what legislative leaders want to do for education and what I see in school every day. It's time to refocus on the needs of our students, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. Now I'll call forward Daniel Sellers and Julia Pringle.
Good morning.
Welcome to our committee. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Sure thing. And I also have one handout if there's someone who can bring that up.
The pages will.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Sellers, and I'm Executive Director of Ed Allies, which is a state-based education advocacy nonprofit seeking educational excellence and equity for all kids across the state of Minnesota. And I'll keep my testimony this morning very brief. We support this bill for two reasons. One is contained in this report, which was done by an organization called MinCan, which I used to lead. And anytime you're considering in this committee a bill, especially a bill of this nature, it's most critical to think about the impact on student achievement. And one of the things in a very short manner that this bill, or that this report lays out, is that the law that requires districts to lay off by seniority-based means only actually harms student achievement. And there are a number of studies that we cite that both look at national trends and regional trends that show that the impact of not retaining the most effective teachers possible is significant on student achievement. And it's important to note that, thank you. Oops. It's important to note that, this is my second point, which will conclude my testimony, that this is not about getting rid of ineffective or quote-unquote bad teachers. This is about maintaining the most effective teachers. And anytime that a district has to go through the unfortunate process of layoffs, we should be maintaining our most effective teachers. Several years ago, this committee heard a bill that we supported that sought to not only eliminate the seniority-based provision, but also replace it with a specific process for evaluating and evaluating and retaining teachers. At that time, we heard opponents of that bill say again and again that this is something that should be left up to local control. This is a local control issue. And what I so appreciate about Representative Loon is she's listened. We are now leaving it up to local control to decide how to retain the most effective teachers in the unfortunate circumstances of layoffs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Is Ms. Pringle in the audience yet? Then we'll call on her later. Ms. Kelleher and Ms. Dietrich from the School Boards Association. And Mr. Amoroso, if Ms. Kelleher is not here, why don't you come forward and join Ms. Dietrich? Welcome to our committee. Please say your name and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Denise Dietrich, and I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota School Boards Association. And Ms. Kelleher is in another committee as of right now. House File 1478 addresses the issue of placing teachers on unrequested leave of absence, which is absolutely relevant to locally elected school board members who are ultimately responsible for the hiring and the painful job of letting teachers go when needed. As elected officials, they make these very difficult decisions as a part of their inherent managerial right and responsibility. But much more important, they make these decisions because they know that every classroom needs an excellent teacher who best fits the needs of the district, the school, and the students for today and into the future. Now, it is the responsibility of the state to make policies which give school boards the tools that they need to make, the tools that they need in order to make the best staffing decisions possible. The current default policy of seniority only ties the hands of school districts in making these crucial hiring decisions. The public does not understand this type of decision-making, and it is very difficult to explain that to the local community. This current policy practice is a barrier to attracting young people into teaching. Today's millennials want to enter a profession where they are hired and retained based on job performance, not seniority only. MSBA supports the concept of requiring school districts and exclusive representatives of teachers to negotiate the unrequested leave of absence. However, we do need to point out that school districts in this negotiations may be at a disadvantage due to the fact that many school districts already have subdivision 11 strictly seniority in their master agreements. And there may be an unintended consequence of forcing some school districts to make less desirable concessions elsewhere in the master agreements. We have some suggestions for that language to help strengthen the bargaining position for school districts, and we'd willingly share those with the chair if she would like to see those. But in closure, we would also like to say that we do support the July 1, 2018 implementation date, but we do need to ask the question, what happens if a new master agreement is not ratified by July 1st, 2018? And we would look for some answer and some guidance there. So in summary, I would like to just make a couple of closing comments. We believe that House File 1478 has some really strong principled beliefs. It respects the concept of good faith local bargaining. It reinforces the authority of school board members in staffing their responsibility, which is their primary responsibility. It reinforces and strengthens the role of teacher evaluations, which hopefully will lead to improved teacher and student performance. It encourages school districts to take a locally controlled solution to an outdated ULA policy, and it does allow some flexibility then in that negotiations to protect some teachers with seniority or provide language to that effect. So with that, we are in support of the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dietrich. Mr. Amoroso, welcome. Please say your name and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gary Amoroso, Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of School Administrators. I will be very brief, as many of the points have already been made. Our association supports House File 1478. This has been a provision that we've had on our platform for the last number of years. And for us, it's about maintaining the most effective teachers in the classroom. I can tell you that superintendents are not ones that enjoy going through this type of a process. We're not interested in reducing our staffs, but there are times that because of financial reasons, because of programmatic reasons, there is a need to look at your staff and to make adjustments. When that is done, I believe it's best to provide an opportunity for the school districts, bargaining unit, and the board to come together as they do for all other working wages, working condition topics, and make the decision that they feel best works for their district. That's an empowerment. That's something that I believe is very, very useful and would serve our students well. I also want to mention that at times we have these conversations and we hear the topics that school boards and superintendents are going to make decisions based on the financial dollar. Quite frankly, that's offensive to hear that. I firmly believe that our school boards and our superintendents and other administrators, as well as our teachers, our support staff, we're in the business to do what's best for our students. We're in the business to provide safe, nurturing environments. We're in the business to provide opportunities for our students to succeed. And I think that this bill will provide opportunities for our boards and our bargaining units to come together, come up with what they believe is in the best interest of their system in the case that you have to have a reduction in staff. As the chair mentioned, I do also believe this has the potential to be an incentive for people to go into the profession. As a former superintendent, I had to make some of those decisions where we had to look at reducing staff, and it pained me to look at the only factor was a person's seniority, not their effectiveness, not how they were interacting with our students. So members, Madam Chair, I hope that the committee seriously considers adopting House File 1478, because I do believe it is something that can help us move forward in providing experiences that will benefit our children. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Amoroso. Mr. Bartholomew and Ms. Stout, representing the Minnesota Business Partnership and the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Mr. Bartholomew. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, my name is Jim Bartholomew with the Minnesota Business Partnership, and want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning in support of House File 1478. Why is Minnesota one of only 10 states in the country to have a law mandating school districts lay off teachers based on seniority? Is it because research shows a seniority-based layoff process ensures districts can keep their most effective teachers? That it helps districts retain newly hired teachers of color? Or that a seniority-based system creates more stability for low-income students whose schools tend to have less senior teachers? Obviously, the answer is no. Minnesota's current law is out of date and unsupported by research. With the state shifting accountability for school and student performance to local districts under the world's best workforce, and the completion of the first 3-year cycle of locally negotiated teacher evaluations, it's time for the state to get out of setting district layoff policies. House File 1478 creates a clean slate by giving local school boards and their teacher representatives the opportunity to negotiate layoff processes that go beyond strict seniority and to reflect their district's unique needs and circumstances. Thank you, and we'd ask for your support of House File 1478.
Thank you, Mr. Bartholomew. Ms. Stout, welcome, and please say your name for the record and begin.
Good morning. I'm Stacy Stout with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Chair Erickson, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today in support of HF 1478. The Minnesota Chamber represents over 2,300 members, most of whom are small to medium-sized businesses. The number one issue we hear from our members is workforce shortage. An effective teacher at the front of every classroom is key to elevating academic performance to world standards for all students and ensuring that students are graduating ready for the world of work. When a school district has to have layoffs, They should be allowed to prioritize and keep the best teachers in the classroom. Currently, how effective a teacher is not factored in. Teachers are one of the most important factors in student success. Yet, Minnesota's last in, first out policy for teacher layoffs protects teachers with the most seniority when schools experience rounds of layoffs. Experienced teachers can be highly effective, but the number of years a teacher spends in the classroom provides little indication of the quality of teaching. This bill makes it clear that the responsibility for determining teacher layoff policies rests with the local school districts and not state law. One, by repealing the state law that requires layoffs of teachers based strictly on seniority unless the local alternative has been agreed to. And two, requiring school boards and their respective teacher unions to negotiate a plan for laying off teachers, which could include the consideration of the teacher's effectiveness over seniority. The current seniority-only requirement not only forces schools to lay off some of their most effective teachers, but it also means schools are forced to reverse recruitment of top talent simply because of the newly recruited teachers have less seniority. This bill allows decisions at the local level to ensure that effective teachers are retained. We hope you will support HF 1478. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stout. Mr. Kroonquist and Ms. Forsland, if you would come forward, please. Welcome, Mr. Kroonquist. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Scott Kroonquist with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts. And I will be very brief because the points that I was going to make have really already been made. But we do want to go on record in thanking Representative Loon for bringing forward House File 1478, and we do support the bill. As has been mentioned, this is really a local control issue. In fact, and at its core, what the bill would do would allow school boards and their local teachers to negotiate the agreement related to ULAs that best meets the needs of their students and staff. There's nothing in the bill that would prevent seniority from being a factor. In fact, it could be a very significant factor, or a school board and their bargaining unit could adopt what's currently in state statute if that was their decision. Seniority is important, and I think our local school boards recognize that, and it should be a factor, but it shouldn't be the only factor when we have to make these kind of decisions. And so we appreciate Representative Loon's bill, which would allow some local control and flexibility, again, in determining the agreement that would best meet the needs of their students. Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Kroonquist. Roger Arnson. And on deck, Nathan Strang, who's an educator.
Apologize, Madam Chair, I was back there a little bit.
Welcome to our committee. Please say
Thank
your
you,
name
Madam
for the
Chair and
record
members. For
begin.
the record, my name's Roger Arnson. I represent the elementary and secondary principals associations. One of the things that you might not realize initially is that actually all of your school principals and assistant principals are in this statute. And so we would be required to negotiate unrequested leave plans for all of the principals in the units in Minnesota as well. I don't think the authors thought about my age and how hard that's going to be on me, but it is quite a challenge. I want to say about the bill, and I've thought about this a little bit. When I signed up to testify yesterday, Mr. Hossack then sent the note back that says, are you a proponent or do you have concerns? And one of the old education lobbyists that used to be around here that's retired now, Bob Meeks, would say quite often, some of my friends are for this and some of my friends are against this, and I'm with my friends. I think that's kind of where we find ourselves in this bill. A couple of things about it that I'd like you to be aware of. When it comes to the statute that you repeal here, and that is the default plan as Representative Loon has laid out. There's two pieces of it, though, that you're repealing. One is the order of layoff. There's a second provision, or sections of provisions in there that talk about reinstatement rights, and it establishes some pretty well ingrained practices for when we recall people back. And that's a little touchy issue as well, and we're repealing all of those. I might say I do believe that we'd have the ability to negotiate a lot of agreements. If you look back to your practice on teacher evaluation, you did say there'll be either a default model, which the department set up for teacher evaluation, or locally negotiate a plan. And everyone did negotiate a local plan. There was a lot of incentive to do that, but it is a lot of work, you know, and so I think you want to keep that in mind. I have talked to principals very recently about layoffs. I think it's important that you know that a principal just yesterday who's going to be laying off some teachers said layoffs are personal. I mean, we don't like doing them. We want to avoid doing them. And frankly, what we'd like to see is other ways that we can avoid that process. I would want to say we've done very few layoffs of school principals in the last decade. I can only think of, maybe one a year that we engage in that. So it's a rather contained issue, but it is going to be a lot of work. Finally, I have a bit of a question about the effective date. I wonder if you said for contracts that are being negotiated in the 17-19 period would have to have the provision in it. That might make it a little better. I don't know that we'd want to get deals done, and we would hope that we'd have a lot of deals done in the 17-18 year and then have to reopen anything. So just a thought there. I don't think that's a leverage piece one way or another. I just think that's a practical thing. I will say that whatever you send out to us, and with all of us, we will make this work. And so I think you have that commitment from all of the education organizations, top to bottom, that come up, Madam Chair. So I appreciate that you heard this bill first when I noticed I was last, and you said you were going back at 5. I kind of thought it might just be you and me, Madam Chair, at 5. And, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnson. Is Mr. Strang in the audience? I do know that Ms. Pringle has arrived. So if she would come forward. Welcome. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Good morning. My name is Kulia Pringle, and I am a mother from St. Paul. My daughter is a former student in St. Paul Public Schools, and I'm a recent graduate. I'm earning my teaching degree. And now I currently am transitioning, teaching at a public charter school in St. Paul. I'm also a parent organizer who works with parents in the Twin Cities and across the state, and in educational advocacy. In each of these roles as a woman of color, a public school teacher, a parent, and a parent organizer, I've personally endured the negative effects of the current last in, first out, quality blind layoff policy, commonly known as LIFO. I'm here today because I believe that this proposed bill is a step in the right direction, offer my testimony in support of this bill, and to ask that members of the committee continue to move it forward through the legislator. As a new teacher who is also a woman of color, the current law has had a direct and negative effect on my career prospects. This law discouraged me from working in our public district schools because it guarantees that new teachers have no job security when budgets are cut, even if I'm doing an excellent job in the classroom. This is especially troubling in light of our state's recent efforts to diversify the teaching force. Lastly, and most importantly, this bill is better for students than the current law. Removing the statewide LIFO default policy, as this bill will do, plus every school district in a position to actively consider students' rights while writing their own teacher layoff protocol. If this bill is passed, I hope that districts will put their students first and enact policies consistent with our state's constitution. Therefore, I support this bill and ask our legislators to do the same and stand up for Minnesota's children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pringle. Members, questions for Representative Loon and this House File 1478. Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Loon, thank you for bringing this bill. I don't hate this bill, and I love its intent, and I think a lot of folks brought up some really good points, and I think my biggest concern, and I would love to get to a place where it's a yes and I want to hear more about that, about how we could get to a place where we're not doing LIFO, where it's not disadvantaging new teachers. I lost some great teachers to that as well when I was in high school, but we're not undermining the collective bargaining units. And so I think there were some folks who said they had some suggestions. There was talk about the unintended consequences for principals. And so I just want to hear more about maybe what that might look like, and if we could maybe work some of that in to assuage some of those unintended consequences for what at the heart I think is a really, really good bill.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative McQuaid. Well, I think, I appreciate the comments that were brought forward, especially with regards to principals, and I'm very much open to any particular suggestions. I know in talking about this bill with school districts and teachers, the affected people involved in this, you know, the suggestion of having a fallback, such as we have in state law, but maybe changing it in case there was no agreement reached, is something. It's something I guess I'm open to, but again, on the other hand, when in the past I've offered a different version of this, which would prescribe in more detail things that must be included in that plan, there was pushback on that as well. So I guess I prefer to err on the side of giving total flexibility to the local districts in their bargaining, and believing that the administrators and the exclusive representatives of the teachers bargaining unit will come together in good faith and work out a system that works well for their school. You know, for some of the concerns raised about whether or not seniority would be a factor, it's always been a provision in previous versions of this that I've carried that said seniority would continue to be a factor. It wouldn't be my preference that it be the only factor, but again, you know, in House File 1478, I'm completely leaving those decisions up to every local district.
Other questions for Representative Loon? Representative Mario?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Loon. And you and I have danced this issue a number of times.
Yes, we have.
Hopefully, we'll be kinder to each other this year in the process. Couple of things. I hear a lot in the testimony about effective teachers. I don't see anything in the bill that talks about effective teachers. So walk us through a little bit about what the intent of this bill, not the intent, I'm sorry, how this bill will be operationalized in such a way that leads to a maintenance and a persistence of effective teachers, and how will we know that?
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Mariani. Well, as always, you ask very, very good and thoughtful questions. You know, we have a teacher evaluation system that's in place in every school district, and those are locally negotiated plans. There was a model put forward, but I believe most districts, you know, crafted their own. It would certainly be my hope that those evaluations would be useful and become part of a consideration in crafting an unrequested leave policy. But, you know, again, just reflecting on my last journey down this path of trying to make some adjustments in the unrequested leave provisions, you know, I had suggested that teachers with higher effectiveness ratings for the evaluations be offered some protections in the layoff system. And there's concerns raised because not every district has the same teacher evaluation system, whether or not each process actually had sort of rankings of effectiveness among teachers. So again, in order to sort of avoid language that becomes more confusing or problematic for districts, I'm going to trust the local districts to come up with a policy. You know, I know the school board and the administrators and the teachers in my own district well. I think that they will come together and develop a system that, again, looks at a number of factors. I would anticipate seniority would continue to be part of that, but that they would also look at the effectiveness of the individual teachers. As we have talked many times, there are shortages in areas, special education, certain science and math teachers. Those things, I think, are all really valid considerations when crafting a layoff policy. And while I do feel strongly that teacher effectiveness and their job performance should factor into layoffs, I've decided not to go down the path of prescribing some of those things in this bill, simply removing the default language, which again I think has contributed to a reluctance or an unwillingness to sort of open up this negotiation locally because that fallback exists in state law. So in removing that, opening the door to the locals to negotiate as they do on other things, on wages, on benefits, you know, many other things that are important to to your teacher contracts.
Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, and Chair Loon, I'll return the compliment as well. Thoughtful approach to your legislation, and we don't always agree on where we come out on that, but I do appreciate that you're walking through, and I hope that you recognize that I do the same as well. Members, there is a sticky wicket here, and has always been here relative to, quite frankly, the importance of adult human being professionals to be able to work in a professional environment that that treats them like adult, mature professionals. And I'm too young to remember this, but I certainly have heard it from my elders, what the landscape looked like 40, 50 years ago for professional teachers as employees of public school districts. There were abuses that were quite rampant in terms of their employment status, basically at will nature of their employment didn't produce a stable system for us. And so I would argue that the seniority language that we have before us is largely based on that desire, that response to that situation that we had decades ago, and a desire to develop a stable professional class in our classroom. Another way of saying that is that, and this I think is true of any profession, in any venture, ownership of your people is vitally important for the quality inputs and the quality outputs that a system produces. And quite frankly, put it in street language, if you're treating someone pretty poorly, and I had other language in mind, I won't use that, we're in committee. If you're treating people pretty poorly, they're going to perform poorly. And so the issue here, in terms of seniority, because part of what's being framed here is that seniority is a problem. I'll concede that seniority can be a problem, but I will not concede that it needs to be a problem. And we heard assertions earlier, equating this need for effective teachers with, the seniority-based layoff system. Frankly, I've not seen any data in the state of Minnesota that quantitatively proves that. I heard assertions earlier about regional and national studies. I looked through some of the handouts to look for those studies. I don't see them. This issue has come up before. We've asked for that data in the state of Minnesota. It's a big leap, quite frankly, members, for us to simply argue that just because there is a seniority-based system and because we have these gaps, that the two are, conclusively linked with one another. Here's the reality, and Chair Loon and Chair Erickson, you and I, over the last decade, worked to put this in place in Minnesota. We didn't always agree on that, but we found lots of places to agree. And that was the Rep. Peterson, later Senator Peterson legislation that established a mandate and a requisite in the state for us to have a teacher evaluation system. That's still a young and evolving thing. But our bet is that that system will then produce the data, the quantitative, the stuff you can put around, not just emotions here, but real stuff that points out to us whether a teacher is being effective or not effective. And it seems to me that this legislation really ignores the fact that that's there. And not only that, but ignores the fact that in the real world, people need to be treated well as professionals. And we have a history of public schools in the past not treating our teachers well. So there is a sticky wicket. There's a balancing, kind of act that we're walking through here. And I think this bill really disrupts that act. And so, Chair Loon, I have no doubt of your intent, not at all, or you, Chair Erickson, on this issue. And I think Representative McQuaid, expressed, solidarity with that intent. I just think that this is the wrong way to go at this. The way to come at this is to continue to strengthen our teacher evaluation system, to continue to get better at being able to identify what effective teachers are, at the same time that we respect the professional rights of folks doing the most important work in our classrooms. And I know someone's going to argue, yeah, Carlos, all you care about is about the adults. No. What I care about is about empowered individuals who see a strong stake and respect of who they are juxtaposed against a objective teacher evaluation system, which is the one that we're building right now. So, Madam Chair, I believe this is going to the motion is to take this to the floor. And
Correct.
Good. I think that's good. I would hate to have, quite frankly, lots of other good things that we're moving in a bipartisan manner here to be distracted in an omnibus bill with this provision. That way we can have a full and open debate going forward, stay focused on this issue and do that on the floor. So Representative Loon, with regrets, because I appreciate your leadership, I won't be supporting your motion here today.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my friend Representative Mariani. Again, I deeply respect and value your opinion. We just don't happen to agree on this one. The only thing I wanted to say with that was your discussion of balance. And unfortunately, I think by having the fallback of seniority in the statute really provides an unbalanced system. Because of that language, there is said an unwillingness or a reluctance to open up a discussion of an unrequested leave policy negotiation locally. And while I know we've talked about the teacher evaluations and effectiveness, and I think 2 years ago it was too new, and I think that law was passed in 2011. We are a few years down the road with it now. It hasn't been in place for 10 or 20 years certainly, but enough time that a 3-year summative evaluations have been done through this system. So I think there are many valid points that should be discussed when the unfortunate instance of a layoff has to occur. And again, with many of the things that we're facing, teacher shortage in licensed teachers in certain licensure areas, trying to increase the level of diversity. All of that means trying to pull in new teachers, and yet we have a system that says you can spend millions of dollars recruiting, we can offer student loan forgiveness, other things, but none of that will matter when it comes to layoffs because it's seniority only. And it feels like we are doing things that are very contradictory in that manner. So I would just like to, again, with this bill, try to bring some balance, to have those discussions, to require that those discussions occur locally. Districts may decide that it's too hard and they end up staying with the seniority system. But again, that's something that I'm willing to live with if that's the process that happens.
Representative Ward.
Thank you,
Last
Madam.
question.
Yes, I'll be brief. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Loon, can you give us some idea of how many, because we've been having this conversation for years, I have a sense that some districts are already moving into negotiations that, the question is how many districts need this in order to be able to change their negotiation process?
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 years ago when I offered House File 2, there was, actually the Star Tribune did some looking into how many districts actually had a locally negotiated policy outside of the seniority system, and they really didn't find any. They did a sampling of, I think it was 115 districts roughly that they looked at, and it was all seniority based. The only differences they were able to uncover were in the instances of a tie with two teachers with similar seniority. Was one school district might have you flipping a coin to determine which teacher was laid off. Others something like, I think one of the more creative of what was your GPA in college. Things like that were sort of the tiebreaker factors, but nothing that, again, looked at sort of the effectiveness of teachers or anything that I would consider a more significant factor to be considered.
Closing comments, Representative Loon.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I just appreciate all the testimony on it, the good questions from members, and I would very much appreciate your support.
Thank you, Representative Loon. The chair renews her motion that House File 1478 be re-referred to the General Register. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
No.
The motion prevails, and a 1478 will be placed on the general register. Thank you, Chair Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Our next bill on the calendar is the Fenton Bill, House File 547. Please come forward, Representative Fenton. And members, Representative Jessup brought treats if you are interested in a bit of yogurt, and I think there's fruit. It looks very healthy. So please help yourself, and I think the audience is included in that. Welcome, Representative Fenton. We will have Representative Bennett moves House File 547 to be re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform. Welcome to our committee, Representative Fenton. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Representative Kelly Fenton. And members, House File 547 would transfer responsibility for the Child and Adult Care Food Program, otherwise known as CACFP, from the Department of Education to the Department of Health. This program is a federally funded program through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Funds are provided to the child care centers, family child care homes, after-school programs, homeless shelters, and adult daycares to help them afford healthy food. From state to state, it has varied as to which agency administers the program. In some, it is under the Department of Education. In others, it's administered through the Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, or the Department of Human Services. One of the most important things is to look at how we can make sure that as many children, homeless, and adults in need have access to healthy meals. The Department of Health seems like a good fit. Healthy food access is a core mission of the Minnesota Department of Health. They already administer complementary programs such as Women, Infants, and Children, otherwise known as WIC, Statewide Health Improvement Program, known as SHIP, the Minnesota Breastfeeding Coalition, Family Home Visiting, and Nutrition Assistance Program for Seniors. You're going to hear from people today that are for and against this bill. And I will be the first to admit, change is very hard. But the Department of Education has been doing this since 1978, and sometimes we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, is the same old status quo what is best for Minnesota citizens in need of healthy meals? We also have an aging population. What is the Department of Education doing to reach out to adult daycare programs to encourage them to participate? Is the CACFP underutilized in Minnesota? Who are we leaving behind due to bureaucracy? And I want to point you to the stacks here, and you're going to hear about these later. But this is an application that a sponsor, someone looking to be a sponsor of the program, filled out for the Department of Education. This is what was called a pre-approval site application for someone looking to serve their kids healthy meals. This right here, Colorado. This is a sponsor application for the state of Colorado. And this is a site application for the state of Colorado. Because you're going to hear, oh, this is complex. We can't move this program. Who is creating the complexity? And who are we leaving behind? Because people cannot, who do you get with this? Big corporate, people who have the overhead to hire an additional staff person to go through this. The goal of this program, and my intent, is not to cause a disruption for sponsors or departments, but to serve as many people, from children to adults, who qualify for meals. Now, this is not the first time in this committee that we've had a discussion as to how the Department of Education has handled administrative responsibilities for this program. But I do think it's time to have a serious discussion about a fresh perspective, perhaps a fresh perspective from a different department. And with that, Madam Chair and members, I'm going to turn this over to someone who is operating a CFCP in multiple states and is on the board of directors for the National CACFP Forum. And with that, I'm going to introduce Christine Twait.
Welcome, Ms. Twait, to our committee. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Christine Twait, the Executive Director of Partners in Nutrition. We're a nonprofit agency with a mission of increasing healthy food access. One of the ways we do that is to help programs sign up for the USDA Child and Adult Care Food Program. I'm here today to talk about how the CACFP in Minnesota is broken. I think it's easy to think that the system's working because benefits are flowing. However, as Representative Fenton said, the benefits are only going to those programs that can effectively navigate bureaucracy. So for example, corporate child care chains, Head Start, school districts, and family child care homes under the umbrella of a fiscal sponsor. But for many programs that can't navigate this bureaucracy, especially our adult daycares and independent small businesses serving communities in need, the system is fundamentally broken. It's leaving benefits on the table for the very population that the program was designed for. In the last year, my agency has helped 51 independent child care and adult care programs sign up for the CACFP. The growth was amazing, good for the programs, but it's also revealed a state agency without fundamental and functional procedures to operate a federal program, with culturally insensitive employees, and with an obsessive and myopic focus on compliance that discourages participation. Here's some examples. We've seen programs waiting months, languishing for months in a pre-application process, and then waiting months more for the department to review their application. We've witnessed approval visits and review visits that feel a lot more like interrogations than opportunities for training and technical assistance. We've had programs accused of committing fraud because their day shifts have a low enrollment of children. Why is that? Their parents work in the service industry and low-wage jobs. That means those kids are in the center on evenings and weekends when state agency employees aren't there for those reviews. We've had programs accused of not having anyone qualified to run their program based on their appearance. We've had programs face suspicion when serving their traditional healthy fresh foods because they were unfamiliar to the state agency that was there at their site. Based on how we've seen this program operated in other states, we know that MDE is making this program unnecessarily complicated. This is a sponsor application, as we said in Minnesota. This is for a site. So for us to get a program started, that's what it looks like. We operate in Colorado. They approve this. The response that we get from MDE is that if programs cannot deal with the bureaucracy, then the food program just isn't for them. I think that's wrong. I also understand that there may be costs incurred in transferring the program from MDE, but I will tell you that the return on investment could be substantial. The more programs that sign up, the more federal dollars come to Minnesota, so it'll offset those costs. So I ask you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Twait. And our other testifier, Mr. Mohammed from Sharing and Caring Child Care Center, I bet. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you.
Please say your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed Haji.
Excuse me, Mr. Mohammed, but Paige, would you move what is in front of, oh, thank you. Thank you. It is not nice to look through that pile. You've made your point, and I think it's well. Please continue, Mr. Mohammed.
My name is Mohammed Haji. I'm the owner of Glenwood Child Care Center in Minneapolis. I'm from Somali community. My experience with food program is that it is very difficult to do. It took me 6 weeks just to get the application from MDE. That was very frustrating. Very frustrated. When MDE come out to approve me, there was a lot of paperwork and rules, and I felt overwhelming and confused. It was too much for just one visit. When MDA came to my center again for review, they were mostly interested in making sure that our paperwork was perfect. I felt like they're looking for something else, instead of trying to teach me. I think that makes sense for the Department of Health to be in charge of the food program. The Department of Health already helps me with my kitchen, and they help my families with week. If they were in charge of the food program, then I wouldn't have to add another agency to deal with. I think that Department of Health would reduce the number of papers that I have to keep, and make food program easier to be on. I have lots of friends that own child care centers, and they do not want it to be on food program because of these confusing rules and paperwork, and they are scared to join in. Thank you. I think you should vote for this, to pass this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ikram. Very good, very good. Other testifiers, I believe we have Ms. Kwan, who is signed up, and also Ms. Lucas. If they're in the audience, please come forward. Then we'll move, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I think one of the testifiers was not able to make it, Ms. Kwan.
So was the gal who stood up? I'm Ellie Lucas. Oh, please come forward, Ms. Lucas, yes. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Hi, I'm Ellie Lucas, and I run an organization called Hunger Impact Partners. And I'm here as a neutral expert in the area of food relief for children. I am an organization, a nonprofit organization that works with a variety of organizations. We work with schools, community organizations, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, regional development commissions, and child care centers. And our work is to remove barriers to access to food. So not only do we work with the CACFP program, as well as the CACFP at Risk program, as well as school breakfast and after-school meals and the WIC program, but our work is really focused on working with those communities to come up with solutions that work most effectively in their markets. We funded programs across the state, and the research confirms, and you've heard today quite a bit about it with the earlier bill, that there's a direct correlation between academic outcomes, academic performance, and nutrition. And so our mission is to focus on that and to bring a stronger awareness and understanding of how critical it is to be thinking about not only how well our kids are going to perform, but the fact that they have adequate nutrition to do it. We support the existing delivery channels and the work that we're doing with the Department of Education, as well as the work that we do. They mentioned the WIC program with the Department of Health. They're an effective partner. They're an efficient partner from my vantage point and from the work that we do to help support the agencies as well as the nonprofits and schools that are working to implement this program. What we see is an infrastructure that does work. I don't disagree with the fact that maybe it's cumbersome in terms of paperwork, but I think that those modifications can be made to the program, and I think that nationally you'll see some trends around how can we streamline it, how can we make it easier to actually implement the program. It isn't because of the administrative partner, it's just because of the process that we're held accountable to the feds. I have all kinds of examples in your districts and across the state of work that we've done, whether it's been with a school and, as I mentioned, with an economic development commission. But looking at nutrition and keeping some continuity with those nutrition programs within one agency is really a helpful move. It helps us share the data. It helps us look at claim data. It helps us be strategic about where we can make investments. So as you contemplate this work and what we're trying to do with nutrition programs, I hope you consider the fact that right now, from my vantage point and from the work that I've done with various communities and organizations across the state, it is working. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucas. And then from the Department of Education, Mr. Corday, welcome. Please say your name and begin.
Madam Chair, members, Darren Cordy, I'm an Assistant Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Education. MDE does oppose this bill, and we have several reasons I'll go through. First of all, as was mentioned, we have significant concerns that this would cause a substantial disruption for our existing sponsors, the child care providers, adult care providers that they serve, as well as all the children and families that attend those programs and rely on those programs. This is, as you said, we've been administering this program for a long time. They know our systems. They know who to contact in case there's an issue that they run into. They have relationships with our staff. And the transition between moving a large federal program like this from one agency to another is going to be cumbersome, and it's going to be time consuming. There's going to be new systems built that people are going to have to learn to navigate, and there's going to be new staff hired that they're going to have to build relationships with. Currently, under our existing system, we've got this pretty streamlined. You submit a payment for reimbursement this week, we'll cut you a check next week. There's no way that that's going to be possible during this transition period. So you're going to see sponsors and organizations receive significant delays in their reimbursement, and they rely on that cash flow to keep operations going on a day-to-day basis. And it's possible that some sponsors or organizations may drop out of the program entirely rather than try and navigate a new system. As mentioned, there would be significant unfunded financial implications for both MDE and MDH. We currently have 9 staff that would likely lose their jobs if this bill was passed. These are public servants. They're not political appointees, and frankly, their lives have been turned upside down by this bill. We would lose over $300,000 in rent and indirect funding, which would need to be backfilled by state funds, which we don't have. Our applications and reimbursement system are tied to the school nutrition programs at MDE, so it's not like we could pick them up and move them over to MDE. They're built with child nutrition funds. There would need to be new systems built at MDH that would take significant time and money to create. And also want to say that MDE, despite maybe what you've heard today, we do a good job at administering this program already. We have nearly 500 child care centers in the program, about 10,000 family child care homes, and nearly 49 million meals were served last year under the program or reimbursed in the program to the tune of $56 million in federal funds. We rank 11th in the country in overall performance in terms of the money that we bring into the state under the CACFP, despite the fact that we're only the 21st largest state in the country in terms of population. So we actually outperform 10 larger, more populous states in the amount of money that we bring in through CACFP. Staff have on average 10 years of experience, some up to 30 years of experience. And then during our administrative reviews, we submit surveys at the end to have them fill out, and under those surveys, we have a 94% satisfaction rate with our existing sponsors and providers. And as Ms. Lucas mentioned, I think from a policy standpoint, learning about how early childhood readiness and school readiness is tied to nutrition as well as K-12 nutrition, we have all that data right now at MDE. And if we're going to move one part of it away into another organization, that would really set our research back and the research of our partners back a number of years. So again, would just suggest that maybe you think twice about some of the implications of passing this bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cordy. Members, questions for the author? Oh, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wonder if you guys would come back up, please.
Ms. Twait?
Come on.
Ms. Twait, please return. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that this has come to this point. I've been working with these ladies for 4 years and participated in some of the discussions with MDE. And with the best of intentions, there are gaps and holes. I think we need to be able to explain what the transition would look like so that people can feel comfortable with that. But if you would explain a little bit more about the people who are not being served in Minnesota currently, that would be helpful, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Ms. Twait, if you'd say your name again for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christine Twait, Executive Director of Partners in Nutrition. So in Minnesota, when you say the word child care center, if I say the word child care center to you, what you probably pops up is a KinderCare, a New Horizon, a Kinderberry Hill, a beautiful new facility, right? Fresh toys, very clean, qualified teachers. The kinds of programs that we're working with do have nice facilities. They do care for their communities, but they don't have the resources. They don't have a corporate to call up. The center directors there are they're the bus driver, they're the cook, they're the substitute teacher for, bathroom breaks. They do billing, they do the food program on top of it. So it's communities of color, it's low-income communities, it's our refugee and immigrant populations, it's our small independent businesses in rural areas. Those are all programs that are being left behind. As Assistant Commissioner Corti said, there are some that are not being left behind and are being served well, and that's wonderful. I think they could be served well by the new system as well. But my concern is for the communities that are not able to navigate this process and haven't been met with that spirit of let me make this program work for you, rather than saying, well, this is our system. If you can't cut it, sorry.
So, Ms. Twait, how do you envision the transition if this were to occur, this transfer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My recommendation is that actually the Department of Health go back to the federal regulations. So we've got some systems in place under the current administration that don't need to be there. I want the state agency to do their job. I don't want them to add more. I don't want them to do less. I want them to, implement those federal regulations in a transparent, fair way. So starting with a review of the federal regulations, a comparison to the processes that have been in place, and let's get a fresh look at this, and then let's look at how we can bring an equity lens to this. There might be new computer systems that need to be built. I don't know, the inside of how the IT transition would work. I think it might be a good opportunity to have some fresh employees come in and say, what is the purpose of this program? The purpose of this program is to get benefits out there to eligible individuals. It's not to weigh it down with more and more and more and more paperwork. That's not the purpose of the program. So what I'd like is a review of those federal regulations, a lean system, a system that protects, those taxpayer dollars, but doesn't go, a step any higher than it needs to go. Yeah.
Follow-up, Representative Ward?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So how did you transition in the other states that you've moved to? Because they had programs going on. How did they manage to do this transition?
Ms. Twait.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in Colorado, we are dealing with the Department of Public Health, and that's exactly what they did. So they went back and looked at the federal regulations and said, well, we don't need to require this. That's something that basically just makes us feel better. It doesn't do anything to increase the integrity of the food program. So we don't need to do that. We don't need to do this. We don't need to do that. Let's only do the core mission. And then they did some fabulous work in identifying the need. So when we first contacted them and said, we're interested in feeding hungry seniors and youth in Colorado, they said, I can't wait to have you here. Here are all the programs we would love for you to contact that are missing out. We know they are, but we can't reach them. We need community partners. We need people who understand how to operate in a culturally competent way to go out there and reach out to them. And that's a stark contrast to our reception at the Department of Education. So yes, and I would say that in dealing with Colorado, where it is the Public Health Department, the focus is on equity, it's on participation, it is on minimizing paperwork while protecting program integrity, which is what I would love to see happen in Minnesota.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Can you give me an estimate of how much federal money we are not accessing because of the current arrangement?
Ms. Twait.
Goodness sakes, you know who's a great expert on that would be Ellie Lucas. She has done some fabulous research. It is in the millions. Do you want to provide any numbers?
I can show you. Ms. Lucas, you have to come to the table.
Can't just shout.
Please reintroduce yourself and try to be brief. Members, remember, we have 2 more bills to get through unless you want to come back.
I'll go quickly. I'll go quickly. Ellie Lucas. Yes, like with all these federal nutrition programs, and I think we talked about these numbers earlier, there are federal dollars that are available. The challenges are, and again, to your point earlier, it is complicated. If it was simple, we wouldn't have this problem. So what we see is a pretty significant correlation between the revenue that is available to come into our state and how much of it we're accessing. In many instances, that's the infrastructure that you need to build. So when Christine talks about these child care centers, and I've seen them all over the state and visited them as well, and I've worked with many of the licensed child care centers, is that they don't have the infrastructure built in necessarily to be as efficient as they could. So these numbers are really high. I don't know them exactly, but in the multi-million numbers, because those are federal dollars that do not come in that could. I think that what's, again, sorry, I'm on the other side of this a little bit in terms of the Department of Education, is that I can look at their data. It's their data combined with data from DHS and some data from the Department of Health that helps me calibrate and calculate the formulas that I use that do the assessment around how much money can we actually access. So we know from a fiscal perspective that the higher participation we have in these programs, the more revenue or the more revenue neutral these programs can run. What we do also know is that they need a lot of assistance. They need a lot of support to be effective and efficient. I don't think it's the administrating body necessarily as much as it is just the way the program has been designed by the feds.
Representative Pryor. Last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, a lot of what you've been testifying about is saying that somebody needs to review the regulations and reduce it to the actual core mission that needs to be accomplished. And you've made the decision that the Department of Education is not capable of doing that, and the only thing to do is transfer it out. This does, as we've heard the testimony before, this does have huge financial applications both for the Department of Education and for the Department of Health. And I don't see anything associated with a fiscal note for what it would cost to gut one department program and put it into another department.
Representative Fenton, you take that one.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Pryor. This is a federally funded program, and there was state allocation for it from the federal government. So I think that that could be transferred into another department. But again, this bill is moving through other committees, and it's a work in process. One thing that was not discussed here is shared resources. We need to be looking at how we can share resources. One thing we heard about was IT system, Minute. As I review budget, it looks like, and I can't tell firmly, that the Department of Education is paying almost $100,000 a year just for maintenance, to Minute for maintenance of systems called clicks. So I think we need to have a serious, again, this is about having a serious conversation of serving as many people in need as we possibly can. And where can the departments work together? We need to start having a conversation about efficiency and effectiveness of government services. I think some of it starts with shared resources.
So Representative Fenton, I'm going to take that as your closing comments, if you don't mind.
I want to add one closing comment.
Please do, please do.
Over and over, we heard that the Department of, they are upheld to the federal standards, and that it's complicated. I'm tired of hearing it's complicated from our state agencies, because in this situation, it's complicated means fewer children and fewer adults in need are being served. And Colorado is held to the same federal standards as Minnesota. They've taken it in their own hands to streamline the process to get more sponsors so that more children and more adults can have access. Madam Chair, we need to look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Fenton. Representative Bennett renews her motion that House File 547 be re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. The motion prevails, and the bill is re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform. Thank you, everyone who came to speak for and with concerns about that proposal. Members, now we move to Representative Jessup's 1398. And Representative Jessup, since you're a member, you can move your own bill, and I think you have an amendment as well.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
More freebies. He's learned.
Members, this is a bill about high school equivalency tests, so I think we're in for a little lesson that uses special props. Welcome. Representative Jessup, please introduce yourself first and then move your file as well as the amendment.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today, this is my first bill before this committee, and I have brought treats. I have brought treats for all of you, and I have brought treats for the audience as well. We just got done speaking about nutrition, did we not? Well, today I brought you a nutritious treat. We have fruit in back, along with yogurt and granola. And I expect all of you to set a very good example for the children in all of our lives and make sure that you indulge in a nutritious treat this morning. I also have one additional treat for you. Paige, can I have your assistance, please? If you could pass those out, one to each of the members. We're speaking of nutrition.
Now, Representative Jessup, did you say your name for the record?
Madam Chair, I stand corrected. My name is Representative Jessup.
And perhaps you would like to move your bill and the amendment, and then you can proceed with your treat, number 2.
Madam Chair, I would like to move House File 1398, and I would also like to move Amendment 2.
And members, Representative Jessup moves House File 1398 to be re-referred after it's amended for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Representative Jessup moves the A2 amendment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And Representative Jessup, please now explain your bill after you've done your introductory remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last item for you here is just a small treat, Quaker oatmeal. Back in the 1990s, I worked as a brand manager for Quaker oatmeal, Captain Crunch, other products, and actually I got to introduce this product 20 years ago. I recommend oatmeal as it's very healthy and nutritious for you. That said, there will be some additional that are in this box for those members of the audience that would like one. With that.
Well, Representative Jessup, since I have an office next to you, I will expect an endless supply of oatmeal. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
With that, Madam Chair, the bill before us today is in regards to a GED, which is essentially a brand. Many of us know it if we look on applications from various people, is if you have not secured a high school diploma, oftentimes you'll see on applications, resumes, a GED. You've just gotten a GED. Well, I always thought that that was something official from the state. It was not that case. GED is actually a brand of a test offered by a manufacturer. And the best analogy that I can give you is think of Kleenex. Kleenex is actually a brand, and yet we use it very often in a generic way, whereas we have other competitors that are out there as well. These would be facial tissues. And even some of these competitors say, compare me to Kleenex. So what I put before you is a similar application. GED is a brand. It is not a specific test based from the state. What this bill does is we want to transition from the language of GED in state statute over to new language. And what we want the test to really qualify as is high school equivalency test. That is the language that we would like to move towards. So this bill is essentially a transition of our language from GED to high school equivalency test. And there are other opportunities for us as a state beyond just the GED. We have 2 other tests that have been introduced nationwide. There's one that's TASC, another that is called HiSET. These are offered by alternate companies, and we would like the state of Minnesota and the Department of Education to have the opportunity to evaluate other tests beyond just the one that we have available to us today. And with that, I do have representatives from Data Recognition Corp here, and they may want to provide an additional point of view.
Thank you, Representative Jessup. Members, I'd like you to notice in the amendment the language that Representative Jessup has offered to House File 1398, directing the Commissioner in consultation with adult basic education stakeholders to select a high school equivalency test. I think that's why we had the object lesson just now. Welcome to our committee. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Colin Sheehan with Lockridge Grindle Noun, representing Data Recognition Corp. I'll let Kyle introduce himself, but we do not have testimony. We're here to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. And sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Kyle Kruger with Data Recognition Corporation.
Thank you. Are there questions for the testifiers or for Representative Jessup? Well, this is enlightening.
Good job.
Maybe we could thank Ms. Para for just doing such a good job on the amendment.
Representative Erickson?
Representative Urdahl, thank you. We have to have one question.
Well, it's not really a question. I just wanted to thank him for the oatmeal, which will save me one trip to McDonald's because that's my morning breakfast.
Excellent, yes. And he lives between you and me in the state office building here. So we will look forward to treats, I think, yes, if we're well behaved. So members, with that, I'll ask Representative Jessup to provide closing comments.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I greatly would appreciate your support and put us on a new path in regards to testing for individuals beyond high school. Thank you.
So members, this bill of choice, or that offers choice, 1398 as amended, will be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you, Representative Jessup, for the treats that are in the back and for those that were delivered to our desks. Our final bill today is Representative Urdahl. Welcome to our committee. Yeah, we know you were hurting this morning, so we're glad that you could make it for your bill.
I need it to be gone. Or else I'm going to have to bring another. Whatever.
And Representative Urdahl, once you move your bill, we'll have to re-refer it to the Government Operations Committee because it has a task force. So please go ahead and move your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that House File 149 be considered and re-referred to the Government Operations Committee.
Thank you. Please proceed to explain House File 149.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any treats today, but I'd like to think my bills are kind of like your treats.
Isn't that the understatement?
Yeah. Actually, this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. I can actually remember when I was elected in 2002, and one of the first things that was sent to me was a book on school financing. And I took it to my superintendent, and I said, explain this thing to me. And he was having difficulty. And so, I mean, for a long time, obviously, before I was elected and since, we have compiled how we fund schools. And it's, I think, become cumbersome, inefficient, and we can do a better job. In the way I envision things, it'd be nice if we could just start over again as a new state, and as a new state, how would we best fund our schools? And not having the luxury of becoming a new state, I created this bill, which would create a task force to examine how schools are funded in Minnesota and to come up with recommendations to be passed on to the legislative committees and to the governor as to how to do this. And the fact is, maybe we have the best way that there is. Maybe we can't do anything better. I think we can, but that certainly could be one thing that's part of the equation. But I would like to create this task force. And obviously, it's not the first time. This is not a brand new idea that, my gosh, let's create a new committee and figure this out. I'm sure over the years, like 2013, maybe we had something. We have had other committees, other groups that have examined how we do this. I'm hoping that the way this is set up, that and with what I've asked for in this task force, that we actually do manage to accomplish this goal. Maybe it'll wind up like all the other ones, but maybe just one time we can get through this and accomplish what we're trying to do. And so with that, I do have some testifiers. I'm sure you have some questions, and let's proceed.
Thank you, Representative Urdahl. And members, we're dealing with the policy. The Government Operations Committee will deal with the task force membership, et cetera, itself. But feel free to ask questions anyway in regard to
Chair,
that.
maybe I just say also, I left it as a blank appropriation. I mean, frankly, I think that the department should just do this without a charge, but if there were, we'd have to consider what the charge would be later, but I don't imagine it would be a huge amount.
Thank you,
Of course,
Representative.
sometimes mailing a letter could be $100,000, but that's another topic.
Welcome to our committee, Mr. Lundell. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, Brad Lundell with Schools for Equity and Education. Just want to say with the budget forecast looking better, I think we can afford this. But I would say, I don't know if it's going to be $250 million, but it is, we can. Madam Chair and members of the committee, Brad Lundell with Schools for Equity and Education. Want to support Representative Urdahl on his efforts here. As he has said, this isn't the first go-round with a task force, but I think that having served on a number of, or observed a number of these task forces over the years, I think that there's the opportunity again to look at how the funding systems work, how to get the basic formula where it needs to be, and then also to look at the categoricals, the array of categoricals, and really zero in on how we can make those work better. I think that that's, again, also we want to talk about how the property tax, I think with the government, the big plan back in 2001 that really kind of changed how property taxes worked in the system. That's another angle of this that we would look at. And of course, with Schools for Equity, we're always talking about equalization and getting the property tax system incorporated into the education system in a way that's fair for all school districts. I think I'll have to plead guilty because I think as an education lobbyist, I certainly have helped litter the formula with, the equity formula, which is hardly an equity formula anymore, but I think that was a brainchild of our organization. I think that it's just good periodically to look at why things, how we fund schools, how things got to where they get to, where they are right now. And again, I think what Jim Good, there was one of the consultants that worked on Governor Peleni's task force always said it's good to all of a sudden to periodically, clean the barnacles off the hull. And I think what we have right now is we have a kind of system that's become a little bit complex, and I think we can streamline it and then do adequacy and equity, meeting the achievement needs and the barriers, the challenges to learning that many of our populations have, and certainly have a system that's more clear, streamlined, and would, again, be adequate and equitable.
Thank you. Does the School Boards Association want to weigh in on this, Ms. Kelleher? Thank you, Mr. Lundell. Welcome to our committee. Please say your name for the record and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members. My name is Grace Kelleher, and I represent the Minnesota School Boards Association. And I am in agreement with this bill. I think it's really gives us what the future is going to bring. And school aid formulas, we seem to always add on. We never seem to take very many off. And it makes it very confusing for the public and for school board members to share what's going on. And as an association, this committee and the Finance Committee will deal with people, or school districts who want more money, who are property rich, property poor, and then you have the equalization folks. And at some point, it splinters off from the general education aid every child in this state should receive. So I commend this option. I think it's really good for us to check ourselves in the methods we're using to provide support for students around the state.
Thank you, Ms. Kelleher. Well said. Representative Urdahl, closing comments. Oh, excuse me, Representative Bly has a question. Please.
Thank you, Chair. So, Representative Urdahl, I was still looking for the suggestions from the Finnish system about how they fund their schools. Do you have any comment about that?
Representative Urdahl.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Bly. I certainly think that should be something that they look at as they examine, how schools work. Thank you.
And I guess the schools of tomorrow are going to look far different. I think Representative Bly is bringing up a kind of an invitation to think into the future. Closing comments, Representative Urdahl.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this, and as I said before, I hope that this bill is adopted eventually this session, and that we move forward with doing what needs to be done to address how we fund our schools.
And the chair renews Representative Urdahl's motion that House File 1478, not 149, House File 149 is stand corrected, be re-referred to the Committee on Government Operations. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and the bill is re-referred to the Committee on Government Operations. Members, we'll see you on Thursday. We have quite a long agenda, and then again on Friday as we close out the hearing of policy bills. This meeting is adjourned.